Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. And the topic of this 10-minute moan is Starmer, SausageGate, burnt houses, burnt out cars again. And now, the mainstream media in the United Kingdom are starting to take an interest and miraculously starting to talk about things over and above the very basic stuff they've been talking about for a week. And I'm no fool. So, unless you've lived in the moon, you'll be well aware that two properties connected to Keir Starmer and an old car of his have been targeted by firebomb arsonists, three of whom have already went to court charged with arson and conspiracy. And also that the anti-terror police are also looking at other co-conspirators. They feel there's more people involved. Now that was kind of all we knew about it from our mainstream media. You were seeing far more discussion about this from people like me on YouTube and other social media platforms than you were seeing in the mainstream media. And I found that most peculiar. And I've said it 100 times that if this was any other world leader in any other country, and possibly ours under different circumstances, there would be people tracking down family members, ex-school colleagues, ex-teachers, all that stuff to build up a profile of these three men accused of firebombing. But none of that's happened, which I find really, really odd. So now, and only since yesterday, we're starting to see discussions by our mainstream media. And now what they're trying to do is write a narrative suggesting that somehow this is the Russians. And I think I know why. But before I go into the why, I actually find this quite helpful for people like me. Because in this world where we all know people that have been, some of them are in jail for what they've posted online. We all know Silver Fox, an old pal of mine, was arrested recently for stuff he put out in a YouTube video. And we're still waiting to hear if that's going to go to court or not. But he has been arrested. So when you put out stuff that are a bit iffy towards the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, you kind of start, you do get a little bit conscious of it sometimes and you think, well, is my door going to get chapped soon? But the fact that now the mainstream media, who up until now only printed very basic facts, names, ages, and a rough idea of where they're from, in the media, very basic, and basically cover what was happening at court, it now gives people like me a little bit of comfort that they're now suggesting possible motives. So if it's all right for them, it must be all right for me. And for all the other people talking about this on social media, normal people, non-journalists like me, and YouTubers, etc. So what they're trying to suggest now is that it's the Russians, right? So if you put in Keir Starmer Russia, enter into Google, and you click on news and you put it into date order, as I always do, you will find numerous media, mainstream media, and now because the British media's went with it, the first one that's shown up in my Google search there right now is the Toronto Star. So other worldwide outlets are now jumping onto this narrative that it's somehow Russia to blame, right? The Telegraph, they're now saying Kremlin denies it, shock horror. So yesterday the stories were there's a potential of Russian involvement in this, as in the state, not just people from Russia. And now the follow-up stories by the mainstream media, Russia's denying it. But all yesterday, all the UK media that spoke about it were saying about this Russian involvement. I'll read out some of the headlines. The Independent, UK officials probe Russian links to arson attacking Starmer. News 18, whatever that is. I'll skip back because that's quite a weird one. Daily Mail, MI5 probe Putin link to Starmer arson blitz. The Sun, security cops investigate Georgian restaurant in London and bombshell probe into Russian links to Starmer's arson attacks. The Mirror, Russians may be involved in arson attacks at properties linked to Starmer. The Independent took it a step further and they've had a whole column which was under the headline, Why Starmer is now in the crosshairs of the Kremlin. So they're not just suggesting it was them, they're explaining why it's them. London Evening Standard, officials probe possible Russian link. Blah, blah, blah. On we go, on we go, on we go. So now I'm able to give my opinion because everybody else is. Right, and I don't know is the honest answer. Nobody does. But I know why this narrative's been driven, or at least I believe so. And the reason being, someone said something to me on our Twitter space last week about this. And I was saying my usual line. I said, when it was Southport, I declared this will not go to trial. Because if this went to trial, there might be things come out that people don't want the public domain. So I was not shocked when Rudy Cabana suddenly changed his plea, but actually never pled guilty to anything. He didn't say a word. His plea was accepted by the judge on behalf of him from the word of his lawyer. Staying up to date with events around the world can be difficult, where it's impossible to consult a single source for the full story. Narratives that shape public opinion often just reinforce media and corporate-backed vested interests. It's hard to know what information to trust. See what the media is exaggerating, sensationalising, over or under reporting. That's why I've been using Ground News. Ground News is an app and website that combines news from around the world in one place so you can compare coverage. For every news source, you can see if it has any political bias, how reliable the reporting is, and who owns them. They even have a blind spot feed that highlights news disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum. Take a data-driven view on the news and stay current. Get news from thousands of sources worldwide in one place. I've been using Ground News to help me get all the world's news in one place and give a more balanced opinion on what we read and viewing who is telling us the truth and who isn't. Subscribe via my link to get 40% off the Vantage subscription. It's the one I use to get unlimited access to every feature. Your subscription can not only help my channel, but also help Ground News, as it makes the media landscape more transparent, which I thought was a bit strange. However, that's what happened, so it never got to court. And what I'm suggesting with this is, I will be shocked and stunned if this gets to court. So I said that on a Twitter space last week, and one guy said, well, this could go to court and not be under a jury. I was like, what? Now, I've since spoken to a KC who tells me, and asked him the simple question, how many times would you expect an arson case to go to court and not be on a jury? And the answer I got back was, never. I then said, what if the case was considered a risk to our national security? And I get a slightly different answer. I get a sort of maybe answer. So where my head is, what they're doing now is, they're trying to push this narrative of Russia so that the case gets treated differently than it would be if it was three rent boys chasing up a bit of tick and fell out with Keir Starmer. And I'm still quite adamant that this case will not get to court. And if it does, and it does go to full trial, there'll be so much put onto it on the basis that the Russians are involved, so we can't be putting stuff out in the public domain, and it'll possibly be a non-jury, judge only, and definitely you and I will not hear about it. But my betting pounds, if I had some, would be on this thing no getting to any trial, regardless of whether it's a jury or not. And I will remain with that. But that's kind of why I think the narrative's getting pushed. The Russians done it. And I ain't falling for it. It might be true, but we're only getting fed it deliberately, because nobody said this for a week. And now suddenly it's the Russians done it. You don't fool me. So if you want other people to see this video, give it a thumbs up, hit some comments below, and hit the share button. If you've not already done so, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the notifications bell if you do. However, the most important of all, unless you're the type of person that wants to not just be open and honest with the great British public and using the media to put out the narrative that suits you, than not you. But everyone else, have a great day. Cheerio bye now.